Today's session, we're going to be talking about how to do basic HTTP requests to a weather API and then style the response. Before we start though, we need to make sure that you've got a basic understanding of HTML and CSS, and we also need to make sure you've got a very basic understanding of JavaScript. So these are things like basic loops, if statements, variables, etc. If you haven't got an understanding of that just yet, go back further in the course and catch up just before starting this lesson. To start with, let's have a look at my index.html file. I've got a very basic file here. We've got a title, we're linking a style sheet, and then I've got some basic HTML within my style. If we go to my file here, we can see that we've got my index.html, hello world, another paragraph. And you might have just seen a slight snippet of what I'm about to do next, but to test that our style sheet is properly connected, I'm going to set the background color to pink, refresh my page, and we can see that that's now changed to pink, showing that our style sheet has been properly connected. Next, you need to make sure that you got a script.js file. Mine is currently empty, and that's okay, but we need to now hook that script.js file into our previously made index.html file. We've got two options for this. We can put it inside of the head, which means as soon as the page loads, it's going to pull that JavaScript down and then load the rest of the page, or we can put it at the bottom of the body, which means it's going to load all of the website first and then put in the script. It doesn't really matter which way you do it at this stage, but for performance reasons, it's normally better to put your script file at the bottom of your body, which means the whole page is going to load first and then your JavaScript is going to load. And that's important because JavaScript is normally quite heavy. So let's import our JavaScript file here. We can do this with the script tag. We go script source, and then we reference the location for where our script is. As is called script.js, so we can just do script.js and import it just like that, and that's all we need to do. To make sure that this is properly imported, let's print out something in our script and console.log to the screen. So we can do hello. Now, of course, you should have already done this before in your previous lessons, but let's just test this works. If we go to console, we can see it's printing out hello. Now, for this lesson, we're going to be using the Meteo API. To find Meteo, you can go to open-meteo.com, and it's a free weather API where you can plug in a certain longitude and latitude, and it will return some data for you. For this example, I'm going to be using my hometown of Birmingham, and a quick way to get the longitude and latitude of a town you want to do. So we've got Birmingham here, but if I type in London, you'll see that Google will give you the longitude and latitude for that location. So I'm going to go back to Birmingham for this example. And we can see the longitude and latitude here is 52.497, etc. And then the latitude here is -2, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to actually click on this link here. They've already got quite a lot of it set up. So this, it's saying the latitude is this, the longitude is this, current temperature, and all this other stuff. You don't really need to care about this just yet. For this example, we're going to consider just the latitude and the longitude properties. So if I come in here and paste my longitude and latitude values that I took from Google, I can see it's 52.49, so I'm going to keep that. And then I'm going to cut out this -2 and put that in this longitude example here. If we now press enter, we can see this is a response from the API. So a good way to think of an API is that you're simply requesting a piece of data on a URL. So here you can see this is just a normal URL you can access in your browser. And then the server is going to process that for you and return some data instead of it being a HTML page like you might see on Facebook or Google, Instagram, etc. It's just going to be some raw data. In this case, we get some JSON back. I've got a useful plugin on my browser right now which will allow me to pretty print that. So I'm just going to hit this, and we can see that it's formatted the JSON, so it's just a little bit easier to read. What I'm going to do is take this URL. I'm going to go back to my script, and I'm just going to make a new variable called API URL. You can call this whatever you want or format it whatever you like. Just make sure it's easy to remember and reference later on in the code. Now, to make sure that we've got that variable referenced properly, we can print it out inside of our code. If we go back, refresh the page, we can see that we've got this URL. You can also click on it and see what the result is. In this example, we're going to be using fetch. So fetch is the built-in browser object that you can use to request things from an API, and it works quite simply. To begin with, I'm going to make a new function. I'm going to be using ES6 functions. You can also just use normal function and the whatever syntax. For this example, I'm going to be using ES6 functions. So let's say const get data from API. I'm going to then make it an async function. As you've learned in the previous lessons about promises, we're going to make this asynchronous because fetch is asynchronous under the hood. Then what we're going to do is get our response from the API. And to do that is quite simple. We can go const response equals await fetch dot get, and then put in our API URL. Now, if you want a bit of a cheat sheet, what you can do is search for fetch on the MDM docs, and you'll get the full API for how fetch works. And this is super useful when you're want to actually make a fetch request and return some data. So here I can see straight away I've actually made a mistake. Now this is important. I've been programming for 12 years, but this happens all the time. Make sure you got the documents and the references up whenever you can. They just make your life easier. It's more about remembering the methods and the methodologies rather than the exact code itself. So here I'm just going to use just fetch, await to fetch. So I'm going to get rid of my get here. And then to actually get that response, I can do, let's call this data response.json. And we can double check if that's right by looking at here. So you might have seen I did response.json, but JSON is actually a promise, which means we need to await for it. Otherwise, this is just going to return a pending promise, and we can show that here. So if I go console.log data and we call this function, we can see this is a pending promise. To get that promise to resolve, we can put await in front of it, refresh, and now we've got the data that comes back from the page. But now you might be thinking, okay, cool, we've got the data, how do we actually use it within the website itself? Now there's a few ways to do this, but for this example, I'm going to be using document and append, and that will just make things a little bit quicker and easier for this example. So once we've got the data here, instead of just logging it out, I'm going to use document.append, and I'm going to stringify this data, just like that. If we refresh this now, we can see that I've got an error here. It failed to append on document. So what I actually need to do is select a div first. To do that, you can go back to your page and let's make a new div with an ID called weather info. Right now this is empty, and if I refresh, nothing will be there. But if we go to the script, we can select weather info. So we can go weather info equals document.getElement by ID, and then we type in the ID, and we know that the ID here is weather info. Let's put that there, and then we can go weather info.append, and we should be able to append this text to the end of it. If we refresh, we can see that this data is now appended. Now this is quite a lot of data to work with straight away, and all I care about right now is what is the temperature of the weather in Birmingham. So you can see here we've got quite a lot of data, but in the top we've got this current, we've got the time, the interval, so this is how often it's being refreshed, and the temperature, so temperature underscore 2M16. And we can break this down a little bit more. So we can see inside of our object we've got current. If we go into current, these are all the pieces of information that we're interested in right now. So to get that, I can do data.current, and if we go back, we'll see that's broken down just to that object. It's starting to rate limit us a little bit, so we might have to wait a second for it to come back. We can see we've got the time, the interval, and the temperature underscore 2M. So right now, I'm just going to do .current.temperature underscore 2M. And if we refresh this, we can see it's 16. So that's a little bit boring. Let's stylize it and make it look a little bit better. We can get rid of this JSON.stringify for now because we're not stringifying any more data. We're just printing out the direct number. And to make sure this is safe, we can put the coalescing marker here, the question mark, and this just says if .current or .temperature isn't inside of this object, it's just going to return null rather than crashing your program. Refresh that, we can still see 16. Let's add a little bit of styling here. So inside of our weather info, I'm going to go to my style.css. I'm going to do weather info. Let's set a font size to 2rem. Let's add a border onto this. Let's do 1 pixel solid let's make it grey. Let's add a bit of a radius to it. That will just make it all nice. I know you guys already know this, so I'm just going to speed along through this. We can see we've got a nice little border. We've got the text, it's a little bit bigger. How about we add a bit of a padding? Do that. It's a little bit nicer already. And now let's center it. So let's set the max width for this box to, let's say, just 100 pixels. Let's set the height to 100 pixels. I'm doing my CSS in alphabetical order here. You don't have to, but I just find that helps me keep track of it all. We can see there. And then let's center our box. Quick way to do that is by going margin 0 auto. So this says don't do anything on the top and bottom, but set the left and the right side of the margin to basically fill the space in the screen. So if we go back now to our file, we can see that's now centered, and we can center our text by using flex. For this example, I won't go that far, but let's just style it a little bit further. So inside of our script, we're currently appending this text. From an earlier example, you should have learned about the templating syntax. So what we can do is take a piece of data, and to maybe make this easier to track, we can go current degrees in C, take that, paste it there, and then reference it in this string that we're going to append. So if we go current degrees in C, and then do C there, and go back, and we can see 16C. We can probably make this look a little bit better if we want to. We could do something such as above this weather info, go, what is the weather in Birmingham? Let's get rid of this hello world text. We can go back and refresh. What's the weather in Birmingham? 16.1 degrees C. So we see that the API is just updated behind the scenes as well.